Hello, I'm Rob. I'm a front-end developer, so it's my job to usually build forms and drop-downs and buttons and stuff like that on web apps. But I'm actually going to talk to you about my adventures with augmented reality and a little bit about virtual reality as well. I'm the kind of guy who got into front-end by right-clicking and viewing the source and going in there and basically finding out what was going on, and I woke up 8 years later and I'm working on single-page applications. I work for EW since about the end of 2015, working on said forms. Also in that time, I been working on a game on the side with my friend Will. I think it was early 2016, Will came up to me and he said he had an idea for a game. He said it was going to be a location-based augmented reality flight tracking game. I knew what some of those words were, but then he explained it to me a little bit more, and he said it's going to be a game that's based on real flight data, a bit like the data that you would see when you go onto apps like Flight Radar 24. So you've got aircraft data, you'll have the location, the speed, the manufacturer and the model, and then you can work out the rarity of an aircraft based off its model and how common it is. Then you've got the airport data, which obviously you have the location of an airport, and then you have the number of routes in and out of an airport, which you can work out how busy it is, and you could probably rate an airport and score it a bit. Flights, are just composed of an aircraft and a couple of airports, the origin and the destination, and the distance and the duration of the route. You could probably score those, put some value on flights, and of course there's thousands of flights in the sky at any one time, so cool, we could make a game out of that. That sounds good. This is a low fidelity mock-up of the augmented reality feature, and this was how he had to explain it to me basically. He's like, you point your phone at the sky, there are some clouds, no I didn't say clouds, there's some flights in the sky and you have to tag them, you have to skyjack them, he said. Cool, sounds like fun. But yeah, and also again the binoculars view, as he called it, the augmented reality feature of the game, heavily inspired by Flight Radar 24's augmented reality feature, so we got a lot to thank them for. But I had never built a game before in my life, and I was a little bit worried about building a game, let alone an augmented reality game. This is me. You can tell because that's my tattoo. And so I've never built a game before, let alone an augmented reality game, so what the hell? But when I thought about it, the game side of things, it was just a gamified app. I'm used to building web apps. I could probably build a flight tracking app and gamify it. But when it came to the AR aspect, I thought, let's build the game without the AR thing, because it's a bit daunting for me. I was just going to build the MVP, let's say, without the augmented reality feature. But then something happened in 2016. This was a few months after we came up, I say we, Will came up with the idea, but we started planning it. Pokemon Go, and it was quite popular, and it kind of threw location-based games and augmented reality into the limelight. So that kind of changed my view on it, and I thought, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to make the augmented reality feature a first-class part of the game. Obviously there's lots of similarities, and we're getting an even more high fidelity with the mock-ups here. So the plan was there's going to be two main views of the game. There's going to be a radar view, which is the map view, and then we thought it'd be a nice interaction if you just turn your device 90 degrees and it takes you into the binoculars view, which is the augmented reality view. So we did it. And Skyjacker was released in June 2017. Here's some screenshots of the game. So like I say, we have the radar view on the left here. This is where you can have a look at the flights that are around you at the moment, and you can try and decide which ones you think are going to be the most valuable to you, the ones that you want to skyjack. And the value, like I say, is based on how rare the aircraft is, how busy the airport is that you land at, and how long the flight is going to last. how long the duration. And then you turn 90 degrees into the binoculars, the augmented reality view. And this is where you actually skyjack the flight, and you have to tap on it and interact with it in the 3D space. When the flight eventually lands, after you skyjacked it, I mean, this could be a long time after you initially skyjacked the flight, you'll get a push notification when it lands, and it's going to prompt you to go back into the game, and you're going to claim the rewards that you accumulated whilst that flight was on its way. And here's an example that you can collect different, you can collect cards for different aircraft. It's the same for airports as well. And of course, the aim of the game is to get to the top of the leaderboard to become the most notorious skyjacker in the world. So I'm going to try and show you me skyjacking the flight now. Let's see if this will work. Here we go. Just connecting my iPad. Most people play the game on iPhones, but for purposes of sharing the screen, the iPad's got the bigger screen, obviously, so I can show it off better. Let's hope this actually connects. I'll give this another few seconds, but it's not working, unfortunately. Nope, the demo gods are not in my favour, so I'm going to move on. But if you want to see the game in action, then you can download it. Or come and find me afterwards. That wasn't planned, honestly.
Well, just search for Skyjacker.
Yeah, search for Skyjacker on the iOS App Store, coming soon to Android. So what I was going to show you was actually going through the user interaction of skyjacking the plane using the augmented reality feature. Can't do that, but hopefully the screenshots show it off a little bit. But since we launched in June, we've had 392,000 and something claimed skyjacking. So that's people who have looked on the radar, pointed the phone or the iPad at the sky, chosen the flight, waited for it to land, which could take hours, got the push notification, gone in and claimed the reward that many times, which is pretty cool. So how we built the augmented reality part of the game. So like I said, the game is like, it's just a gamified flight tracking app, which meant that I made it okay in my mind that I could build it in Cordova. So it's a JavaScript app, JavaScript, HTML and CSS app wrapped in a hybrid wrapper, a native wrapper. And Wikitude, when I discovered Wikitude and the fact that it offered a Cordova plugin, it really gave me the confidence to go ahead and build this game, because without something like that was going to hold my hand and take me through the AR part of it, it would have been really difficult. It gives me the ability to create geo objects from the latitude and longitude and altitude, and it places the markers in 3D space. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to show that to you. And the markers can be styled with CSS, which is great. Front end web developer, CSS, awesome. I can do that. So we did that, we got it live, and then this extremely detailed Trello card. We have to get it working on Android. So the promise of building a hybrid application is that it's one code base and then you can build for multiple platforms, all right? But that sounds great, but obviously in real life there's lots of things that get in your way, and especially after 8 months worth, six months worth of adding features to this iOS game, it became quite mature. And there were a few stumbling blocks when it came to dependency issues, but the main problem that I ran into was when we turned around and we decided that we needed to purchase a license for Wikitude for Android as well. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, Wikitude cost us €600 for a license for iOS. And I was hoping it would be a similar thing for Android, but then they changed their pricing model. Oh no. Yeah, so £2.5 grand a year in euros. I don't know what that is in this money, but And we only use that first feature on there. We don't care about 2D image recognition and 3D engine, stuff like that. We don't want to really be paying this kind of money for stuff we don't really want to use, although maybe in hindsight it might have saved me some time, which you'll find out in a minute why. So at this point I was like, now I need to start thinking about building the game without Wikitude. So I started looking around, and like I said, it's a JavaScript app in a native wrapper, so the first place to look at, it would be great if I could build the binoculars feature using a JavaScript library or something like that, because I do have at the back of my mind a long-term goal of making this a progressive web app, and it doesn't have to be a native app for its whole life. We had some constraints that we wanted to use push notifications and things that were only currently available to us from a native iOS app. Later it could be progressive. But anyway, I found this thing called A-Frame, and A-Frame is a web framework for building virtual reality experiences. And when I actually found this, I was like, how long has this been around? I didn't know this existed. I should have heard of this by now. Building VR on the web, what? And it promises that you can make VR experiences using just HTML. So I was like, right, okay, I'm a front-end guy, I can do HTML, maybe I could build a VR experience. What could I build though, just to test it out? So in the docs, it points you to Flickr, where you can find lots of equi-rectangular images or 360 images. And you can use those as skies in VR experiences in A-Frame. And it also points you to Sketchfab, which is a place where you can download some 3D assets. And I should point out, this is the point where I start, revert to a childlike state and start looking for spaceships and stuff. So I was like, cool, I could get a sky and I can get some spaceships, and maybe I could put them together and it could be my first VR experience in just HTML. Maybe, let's see. So this is the 360 image that I got from Flickr, and here is my flying spaceship. You can call me George Lucas from now on. But it was so simple to do, and the code is ridiculous. It's an HTML page, and it uses custom HTML elements. So you create a scene. Then you can load some assets in the A-assets element. Then you can reference those assets. So that's the sky I was talking about. It just references a JPEG by ID. And then the GLTF model I downloaded from Sketchfab. I'll just plonk in there. I'll give it an initial position and an initial rotation. And then I can put an animation element in there that tells it how I want it to rotate. So what we got, 26 lines of HTML, and I've got a VR experience. You're probably thinking that's not much of a VR experience, it's just like a 3D scene. Okay, on the desktop you can pan around and you can look around a little bit. When you look at it on a device, which doesn't look like it's going to work, it uses a gyroscope, so you can actually look around a bit more like a VR experience. If you hit that button and you're on a device that supports Google Cardboard, it will split the screen into two, so you can stick it in one of these. The great thing about one of these is the build quality matches the build quality of my VR experience. The bad thing about it is it's highly flammable, so I don't recommend smoking when you're using it. So cool, built my first VR experience. Oh, hang on, I'm meant to be working on the Android version of Skyjacker though, aren't I? But anyway, what can we do with A-Frame, in AR space? Now this is going to be difficult for me to show actually without this thing. So I'm going to try and connect this again. Okay, this should be working now, right? Stream. 3 network devices. Cool. All right, so AR with A-frame. Can you see yourselves? Sweet. So you probably, I mean, you might have heard of something called AR Kit, which is what Apple released, and when you build native apps, you can detect surfaces using your camera. But you can't do that in A-frame, you can't do that in the web, just in an HTML file. You need to use markers with A-frame, and if you use A-frame and ARJS, you can use this as a marker, so you can detect surfaces using that. So using the same spaceship, we can actually project that, excuse me, using that marker. And again, this is just in an HTML file. And I'm just going to quickly show you what's involved with building that. So, I mean, that experience is even less than the last one. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. 2 lines less. Hang on. 3 lines less. Auto format. Yeah. So the difference here is I've loaded in the A-frame ARJS JavaScript, as well as A-frame itself. And then I have this ARJS attribute available to me that I can just stick on the scene. And then I have this anchor entity, and that's it. Rather than positioning that spaceship in 3D space, I'm letting that marker position it for me. And I've scaled it down because it was huge. So, and that's all it takes. Will you make this activatable for the Play Store on Android? Well, I'm working on it. Still trying to work, but I'm getting a bit sidetracked with all this A-frame stuff. Get off my back.
Windows Mobile.
Oh. So, gave the game away a little bit there. You're probably thinking, what the hell was that? So I was thinking, what I've done is I've basically gone to Sketchfab and I've downloaded a 3D spaceship asset that someone has created, and it's awesome, but I'd love to be able to create 3D assets myself, but I don't have any 3D skills whatsoever. So what am I going to do? Then I thought, maybe 3D scanning's got better nowadays. So maybe I could just like create plasticine models and scan them in, and then I could stick them in Experience. Yeah. And remember I talked about going into a childlike state? Well, yeah, this is it. And I actually thought, well, do you know what? If I can do that, then maybe children could do that as well. So I got my nephews involved who are aged 11 and 9. I said to them, do you want to create some plasticine models, and then we're going to put them in like a virtual reality experience? And they didn't believe me, but we tried to do it anyway. This is what we came up with. Dylan, age 11, came up with the germ monster, which I thought was pretty cool. Ethan, who's 9, came up with gangster carrot. Genius, man. I mean, like, this just goes to show you get a child's imagination involved, and you'll be surprised. Check out the medallion, I love it, and the cap. And then Rob, age 30-something, came out with the eyeball monster, which is, I think, my proudest moment. I think I'm going to get it bronzed and put on my gravestone. Okay, so we created the models. We wanted to scan them in. Didn't want to really go and buy a 3D scanner just for this project. So I had a little look around, and there's an app on the App Store called Clone with a Q, and it's really awesome. I used my iPad to 3D scan these objects, and as you can see here, the app projects a dome in augmented reality over the 3D model to guide you as you go around and scan it, and it like breaks away little blocks as you've successfully scanned that area, which I thought was really cool and a really practical use of augmented reality. I mean, more practical than my spaceship anyway. So we did that, we scanned them in, and these were the results. That's the germ. The germs are multiplying there. Gangster Carrots, Evil Twin. As you can see, the results aren't perfect. His cap's a bit squashed, and maybe the lighting could have been a bit better when we scanned it, but for such a simple way of creating stuff, I thought it was really effective. Whee! And then there's my eyeball monster sitting on the chair. I should really be working on the Android version of Skyjacker at this point. This bears no relevance to what I set out to do in the first place whatsoever, but it's been hugely fun. Okay, so then obviously the aim was to put these things in a VR experience. Where do these guys belong? I mean, they look like three dodgy characters, so I thought like a jail cell or a dungeon or something is where they belong, right? They're scum, basically. Lock them up. There, let's have a look, see if this works. I'm loading this off of my local machine because the dungeon asset that I found on Sketchfab is 124 megabytes. So we're talking about VR experiences on the web. Obviously, this probably wouldn't work, or at least you'd have to have a more graceful loading state than this. At least you can see them in all their glory whilst the jail loads. There's the jail. It's quite hard to see on this projector, annoyingly, but again, you can have a look around. One of the things about A-Frame that I thought was really, really awesome, and going back to the beginning when I said I was the kind of guy who would view the source and go in and muck about with web pages and apps, to see what's going on. When you have A-Frame in the page, it also loads in the A-Frame inspector. So if you press Control, Alt and I, you can load up the inspector. So you can zoom in, pan around, have a look, and you can mess about with the scene itself. So I'm thinking it might be quite nice to move the camera into the jail cell with the guys in there. So I've got the camera entity selected. This actually reminds me a bit of what Ben was showing in Unity. It must be influenced by that. And then I'll move that up slightly. Okay, I'm in the cell. Here's these bastards, excuse me. I just need to move that over here. And of course, like, you could quite easily go in, we could select one of the characters, rotate them, scale them, all in the inspector, which I thought was really powerful, and it's a great way of setting up the scene. And also, when you do this, you can copy any changes you made to the clipboard. So when you do go in and make these changes, they're not all lost. So you can quite easily go in, and this is the dungeon source code for that experience. It's mostly loading assets in and just positioning them. Obviously, this is very, very basic stuff. There's tons of stuff that goes into building VR experiences that I have no clue about. I'm sure there's a lot to learn there, but it's been really fun and really great way to get kids involved with the tech as well, because it's very hands-on. So, yeah, that's it for me. Android version coming soon, maybe, if I get around to it. But if you're on iOS, you could always go and download it. Yeah, thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions?
So you talked about progressive web apps. How long do you think that's going to delay the Android version of Skyjacker as you play with trying to get the dungeon into a web app?
Hopefully it won't. It won't. But yeah, we even considered not releasing an Android version of Skyjacker and going straight for the progressive web app. But I think it's going to be a step too far for us. So we're going to get the Android version out, and then we're going to look at building a progressive web app. And there's a few more things that need to be supported by Safari first before we can do that for iOS as well. push notifications being a big one, because the game relies heavily on bringing people back. 'Cause it's such a slow-paced game that you have to wait hours for your flight to land. You always need that constant reminder to come back.
Have you tried ARKit? I'm not sure.
Well, I haven't actually. I haven't tried ARKit. For the game, like for us, we thought about it, but
or AR Core, obviously.
No, because what we were doing in the game, we were just projecting things into 3D space geo objects. We didn't need to detect any planes or anything like that, which is what ARKit is good for, if I understand correctly. The other stuff I did, I went down a rabbit hole. But what I did look at one point, I went through a phase of thinking that I was going to rebuild the game in React Native for some reason, and there's a really cool React Native module called Vero, and it will allow you to build hybrid AR apps. So it's a wrapper for ARKit and AR Core. So I kind of looked into it, but I haven't actually written any code.
Thanks. Yeah, you're talking about 3D assets and sort of downloading them or creating them. And
Yep.
the speaker earlier, was it Ben?
Mhm.
Again, 3D assets. Are they the same sort of format? Can you exchange them? Is there a standard sort of style of 3D asset?
So the Spaceship I downloaded was in GLTF format, and that is an emerging standard for web 3D objects. I don't know if that translates into the Unity world at all. And like I say, I don't really have much 3D experience, but from what I've learned and observed is OBJ files seem to be a thing that's been around for a while. A-Frame loaded OBJ files. In fact, the clone app that I scanned the characters in with exported to OBJ. I think there's 4 formats that out of the box A-Frame uses. I'd have to double check that to be sure, but yeah, there's a few.
Okay. FBX is the big one, OBJ and FBX. Those are like the two. DAE as well. DAE.
DAE, yes, DAE you can load into A-Frame by default, I think, yeah.
I was just wondering, and this is probably a really sort of judgmental question, which is going to mark me out, but did you encounter any performance issues because of it running in the browser?
Are we talking about the game or the experiments that I did?
Well, I guess the game, but anything. I mean, are there limitations to this at the moment, like on
Yeah.
reasonably recent hardware?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably see that dungeon demo that I did at the end was really laggy. That was down to the dungeon asset, the 3D model of the dungeon. Yeah, it's good for experiments. You'd have to put a lot of work in, I think, to get something production ready with that sort of asset in there. With simple stuff, the performance has seemed okay so far.